Hello, Ad Age audience. This is Garrett Sloan, Ad Age's technology reporter, and I'm here this afternoon. I'm going to introduce Penry Price, the VP of Global Sales in Marketing Solutions Division of LinkedIn. So, hello, Penry, and thank you for joining me today on Remotely Live.
Thanks, Garrett. Great to see you, and wish we were in person, but not these days, I guess.
That's right. We're going to do it at some point soon at the Empire State Building. Is that right?
We'd love to have you. Once I think we've got a few hurdles to get through before we're going back to the Empire State Building, but we look forward to it at some point. That's for sure.
Yeah, I guess we all do to get back to the office. And speaking of, have you been able to go back at all, visit the Empire State Building, or just stay in the city? You're in Connecticut right now.
Yeah, I'm in Connecticut. I got here. My last airplane trip was middle of February, and I haven't been to the city since March 4th.
That makes sense. A lot of us too. So we miss it. I'm sure you do.
We miss it. I haven't got my stuff. There's a bunch of stuff in the office. We haven't been okay to do that yet, but hopefully soon enough we'll have a sort of a plan.
The yogurt's still in the fridge.
The yogurt's in the fridge. I'm worried about what has been growing in the fridge, to be honest.
Yeah. But that gets us right into it because we do have to LinkedIn. You're the professional social network, the place where business-minded people like to connect. So you must have a sense of what the pandemic has done to sort of engagement there, how people are using it. Are there some new trends you're seeing just about with how people are using the service?
Yeah, I mean, I think, initially we saw from a couple things. There's like the member side and then the business side. On the member side, we saw certainly conversations about COVID exploded from 0 to, roughly 30% of conversations were something to do with COVID. And so the conversation changed dramatically. Then related to COVID was what was happening in business. How is business being conducted in a virtual world where people were working face-to-face really previously before that. So literally everything changed from conversations to what the conversations were about. I do think what we saw on the business side was similar to other sort of businesses that were related to ads, was a very sharp drop-off as we got sort of March into April, where people were really just frozen. They weren't sure what was happening. Their supply chains were stuck. They weren't sure who was going to go into stores to buy things. They weren't sure what they had to make to produce, et cetera. So everything started to freeze. Not until, I would say, early-ish May, middle of May, we started to see that unlocked. And now we're moving back to sort of pre-COVID levels for growth on the business side. And the engagement has changed. Going back to that side, people are talking about sort of more sort of their own issues of personal and professional. Their lives have blurred so much because of working from home. And so LinkedIn is now seeing a lot more conversations that were typically more on just a social platform before, not necessarily a professional social platform, as you sort of said. A little bit of a nuanced difference there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you must, like you said, with the advertisers too, you must get a sense of those trends. If people are looking to, advertisers want to reach people who are in the office, they're on the go, they're doing business trips, that must have been a big part of your business. But there's new types of business. Are you seeing that shift? Like, Delta might not be advertising as much, but Uber Eats is advertising more, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was immediately people like, as you said, at Delta, you have these travel challenges, but what immediately happened was everybody paused and then they sort of reassessed creative, and sort of business has to start at some point. And as we got into, again, early mid-April to early May, people were trying to figure out how to face this new reality and how to actually start to move forward. And we saw the work was really being required to help people understand, brands and agencies really, what was the creative that was working? How do you feel like people are going to sort of react to this type of message? And so we did a lot of advisory sort of efforts around what type of creative was sort of engaging with customers or with the members at that period of time. And so everybody changed sort of their creative outlook on things. And so it wasn't necessarily just new brands or some brands going away. It was the entire shift to new types of creative, new messaging, new supportive messaging, new we're going to work our way through this type messaging. From a newer side of things, and newer brands, we saw a lot more on certainly work from home type things, software services that we're all using more of now, office furniture, things like this that were certainly now more relevant than ever to be sort of shared on a professional platform. We're starting to sort of see sort of come up where they hadn't been before. The other thing I would just say quickly, Garrett, is we also, being a more of a B2B professional audience, while we saw that quick dip like most did, we do feel like we came back relatively quickly because we did have businesses are opening and they do want to make sure they're able to reach their customers. And we've seen that sort of quick trajectory back up, sort of that V-shaped recovery people talked about. We certainly have been seeing that on our side.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that we do have visitors, audience in the people in the audience from all over the world. So I have to let them know to send in their comments and their questions, and we're going to let them get a say. So hopefully we'll get some good ones from whoever's watching out there, maybe on LinkedIn too, hopefully, because you do have video. I mean, you don't report publicly anymore. We don't get a sense of your engagement or your ad growth all the time, but we do see publicly some companies in your space. We saw maybe Twitter really had a hard time and saw lower real revenue slides. Facebook and Snapchat seem to have weathered it a little more and saw growth. Where did you fit on that sort of like scale, say, and not to pinpoint exactly because you don't say publicly anymore exact revenue, but
yeah,
what do you think? Were you growing throughout this, and what do you see going ahead for the last 6 months of the year?
Yeah, we were growing very quickly leading in. So in January, February, we're still growing healthily on sort of our trajectory for the plan for the year. We're on a July, June fiscal, which is as part of Microsoft. That's sort of the way the company operates. So coming into our back half of our fiscal of fiscal 20, we were growing very well. And then again, March and into April slowed down, dropped, like a 20% drop from those growth rates. As I said, we sort of got down to sort of that bottom as we got into sort of late April. And as we moved into, May and beyond, we now are back to where we were January, February. So we're exactly where we had been, even a little ahead as a pre-COVID growth rate. So we feel very lucky about that. We do feel a couple reasons that's happened. One is we took a lot of time to think about developing content and strategies and tactics to help our customers, our brands we work with, our agencies, to face this new reality. And so it wasn't necessarily we were out to sell more stuff or try to sort of push a product or a service to somebody. It was more of, look, this is what's happening on the platform. This is where your audience is. These are the types of questions your audiences are looking for. This is the type of engagement that your audience is actually now showing us on the platform. Let us give you the best sort of support in setting that new direction for you. And so I think over these last few months, we've just been sort of reaching out in a very productive way to try to help and be supportive as businesses go through this challenge. And again, now we're starting to see the growth happen, as I said, even pre-COVID levels and even beyond. I think there's a lot of pent up demand. So I think companies that slowed down during that time period are now recognizing they've got to make up for the rest of their year or the rest of their fiscal. And they're sort of aggressively trying to find those audiences and those customers to make sure they can, deliver what they can for the rest of the year, the remainder of the year. So we still see the back half of the calendar year that we're in as being strong.
And I'm going to now interject again with some shout outs for you because we now have that audience coming in and they're very excited to see you, Penry, as I am.
That's very nice. I'm not sure who's on as I can't look at these things because it gets distracting, but I appreciate anyone.
I get to handle it for you. Don't worry. I'm the host today. We have shout outs for Ross Figurliski, Sydney Hayes, James Dutton, Brad Nierenberg, Tussar Barik, Gabriel Nicholas, John Hansen, and Mohammed Mosley. And on the screen, people are flashing through from Kenya. Are there a lot of LinkedIn users in Kenya?
It's a growing platform in Africa as a country, as a continent, and then the countries. Certainly, I think Kenya is one of the. We've had some tech. There's been some tech conferences we've gone to across Africa as well, just to sort of introduce sort of LinkedIn as a platform and how to use LinkedIn as productively from a member side is where the growth is. The goal and the mission of the company is to make sure we're creating economic opportunity for every member of the world's workforce. So certainly Africa and other emerging markets are places we want to be available for members.
Absolutely. And talking about just what the adjustment's been, people want to be on video. They're doing video more. We're doing video now. There's got to be a million ways you could launch into new multimedia that people are more interested in. What we were going to ask you about stories and where those are in terms of coming to the US, which is stories are going to be the mobile video. They sort of mimic that hot new social media trend of disappearing videos after 24 hours so people can put up a story about their lives. And I guess it would be more professionally focused, but you've been testing these.
Yeah.
And what have you seen in the test, and when will we see them in the US?
Yeah, it's for us it makes sense. I'll sort of go through. We launched in Brazil. Actually, the first country that got stories was Brazil. Then we moved to the Netherlands, Australia, coming to the US soon. Sort of no date to share yet, but coming to the US soon. It makes sense. If you think about LinkedIn, it's a professional platform, certainly. And we do think that there's plenty of people that want to engage on LinkedIn, but actually are a little more nervous. They're a little bit sort of shy, or they're not sure of how they want to show up as their professional self. And so they're a little more conscious about what to post. And so sometimes a long form post or even a short form post or even sharing video on LinkedIn is a little more intimidating than we'd like it to be. We want to be a lot more inclusive. And stories, based on what we've seen on other platforms, have been incredibly successful in the idea of just getting somebody to engage quickly with a little less effort, lower friction, and hopefully for us, not as much of an intimidation factor. And so we're seeing that already. It's going very well in the countries we've launched. A lot of engagement, a lot of new engagement stories that are like showcasing people's work from home environments, or other sort of areas where their blurred world is professional and personal lives coming together. So we're very excited about stories to just allow new members to engage with LinkedIn in a way that makes sense on the platform.
And there's got to be, like we said, just thinking of new ways of connecting. There have to be sort of Zoom is the biggest thing going in corporate America. Do you see ways to connect video conferencing or anything more that you can get into? And you're owned by Microsoft, so you have some big backers who have Workspace there's Microsoft Workspace. Maybe you use that
Teams
for connecting your own company. So what is the video conferencing space or connected TV? What else is video that LinkedIn can do?
You should be on the product team, Garrett. You got some ideas for us.
Call me up. I'll give you ideas.
Yes, owned by Microsoft. We are using Microsoft Teams. People are using Zoom as well. The idea of video, certainly, as you said, is radically different for all of us as it was, from 6 months ago. There are a few things that we're very interested in. One is these types of things where you're actually having conversations, interviews, webinars, in a professional environment. We think it's actually, sort of makes sense that LinkedIn would be a place where that would be either discoverable or it can be enabled or shared, certainly. So we're very interested in sort of the idea of video connections. Events is a huge piece of this, and we've talked about publicly sort of some efforts on the event side. I'm a believer that at some point we're all going to be getting back together again. But we probably will always have more interest in virtual events or connecting virtually because we're all getting so used to it. And there's less friction, less travel, less cost, things like that. So we are certainly interested in becoming more sort of friendly and aware of how we support events that are happening around the world. And so again, that could be from pre-event marketing and attracting the right audiences to those events. That could be something during the events to either, again, share or go live on LinkedIn, or it could be some kind of post-event effort, and maybe all three of them. But the idea of events for us related to live video and video itself is something that's really attractive and we're working on now.
And you are owned by Microsoft, like we said, and your corporate parent is engaged in a very interesting acquisition potential with TikTok. And they're sort of the other end of the spectrum from you. You're, like I said, I don't know if you like me classifying you as corporate social media or business-minded social media, but TikTok is more on the dance end of social media. Yeah. If you get, but still, you've been acquired. You know how it goes. Any advice for any sort of hot company getting bought up by a bigger company like that?
Gosh,
would you like it? Would you like to have a corporate sibling in TikTok?
I'm gladly not involved in any of it. So I will tell you that up front. I have no interest in that. I think I know TikTok because I have two young kids, college age kids, who have put me in their TikToks just frankly to embarrass me. But I get what they're doing as a platform. It's incredible in terms of what it's done over the last 6 months, 9 months. But no, for me, whatever Microsoft is going to do on that or not do, we'll have to see how it plays out.
Sure. And you could, those TikTok videos, I don't think they disappear like LinkedIn stories. So you got to be careful.
On the brand, if Garrett, you're going to show us some of your dance moves, we'll have that forever.
Sounds like your dance moves, maybe. Well, also we talking about the pandemic and information and what we're seeing just on all social platforms and how there's been disinformation. COVID has been a real difficult one for just vetting what people can trust. Yeah. And it's, Facebook has been dealing with this forever in a very hard way. That's been very difficult for them, but it's every social platform, and there's nothing you can, it's not that you can't do anything. It's just a very difficult problem. What has LinkedIn seen with that? Because we have seen similar sort of, and talking about the elections coming up. So the same forces at work trying to spread disinformation. They're on every channel. Yeah. Is there something that LinkedIn has done since being able to see it materialize in this type of bad activity? What's happening in that front?
Yeah, well, I think you said it well, which is sort of it's sort of happening everywhere. It's the reality that when any of these platforms get scale, you're going to have sort of the bad apples as well as the good apples in terms of behavior. And so you've got to figure out your own monitoring strategies and your own ability to sort of detect these things, whether it be sort of AI and machine learning led, if you've got human interactions there or humans sort of reviewing sort of content that's being uploaded or shared. You've got to have the right sort of values in place, which is, I think, a lot where we've spent in terms of making sure we've got clear policies about what content is to be placed or to be shared on LinkedIn or to be put on LinkedIn, and act quickly related to these things. If something is against your terms and conditions, make sure you're sort of reacting properly. So it's all of these platforms, because of scale, starts to run in these kind of issues. For us, there's a couple things I would say. In the beginning, when you recognize what LinkedIn is about, which is your professional identity at heart, you're signing up as, again, a professional. It's connected to who you are. It's connected about where you work, or connected to where you work and where you've worked in the past, where you've gone to school. So the richness of that data makes that your mindset a little bit different in terms of, again, how you interact with the platform and what you do on the platform. So that has been inherently an important part of our ability to generate sort of trust from our members. We just, as a job, we're trying to make sure we keep those things. So trust as an output is something that's very important for us. So all the things we do on the input side, whether that be the professional context or you allowing you to feel safe on the platform, what we do with your data, all of these things are actually important for us to then have the output be trust from the member standpoint. So member first has always been one of our key values. And as long as our policies are clear, they're enforced properly, and we use the right technologies and other human interventions, et cetera, to clean up things that we may find, we feel like we're doing a fair job here. But you're right, it's changed dramatically over the last few months. It probably will change as we go towards the US elections. But we feel like we're sort of working that way, and we've built the reputation around being a lot more careful with this type of effort than possibly some of the other platforms.
Now I'm going to shout out again because I have to ask the audience for questions. I have to bring them into the conversation if anyone's out there. So again, here we have Augusto from Brazil, Dan from Illinois, Nelly from Kenya, Ankur from India, Sama from Egypt, Rika from Canada, Jose from Mexico, Malar from Malaysia, Michael from Sweden. So
it's a good global audience at age. You guys do a great job.
I hope so. And we'll and talking of global audiences, and the corporate world, just like the rest of the world, is dealing with a racial justice awareness moment. Businesses are trying to confront historic injustices. There's a lot of call for elevating Black voices all over, and people of color all over America and the world. And people are using sites like LinkedIn to get these kinds of messages out. Black Lives Matter, racial justice, things that are really resonating right now. And I was going to ask you about how you're seeing that take part on the platform, and ask if you've ever seen, well, I'm going to get to a second part of that question, but just your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been incredible to watch what's happened, to be a part of what's happened over these last 6 months. Of anybody who's been aware and sort of socially conscious about the realities that we're facing and the racist sort of activities, behaviors, in the US and unfortunately even globally when you look at it. LinkedIn, for us, the mission of the company is to make sure that we create economic opportunity for everybody in the world's workforce. Everybody is an important part of that sort of element or a part of that mission. So we are trying to make sure in a few areas. One is we want to make sure that we are building a product and service that is inclusive of all. And so we've got some efforts underway to make sure that things like your profile picture, which we've always said for a long time is important because it generates more interest in you as a professional, potentially for employment. For some, people are not actually, they don't feel that way. They're actually not comfortable sharing their profile picture. They think that actually is a potential way people may be sort of not included or left out by showing their picture, or even certain other parts of their profile. So we're actually trying to do a lot of work on making sure that inclusive and making sure we're talking about every member of the world's workforce shows up in the product of LinkedIn and the way that we all interact with LinkedIn. So that's a huge part of the effort we're taking. On the other side, we're trying to be, from a culture perspective, build, as much of a sort of anti-racist, culture at the company to make sure we're sort of hiring people properly from all walks of life and all backgrounds. We want to make sure we're investing in them when they come to the company, so they actually can thrive and sort of be their best selves and their full selves in the office. And then we want to make sure we have a culture that people feel like they belong in. So after they've been hired, after they've sort of been on a team, they feel like they're being listened to and can bring their full selves. Like, actually, how can they continue to grow and learn and sort of impact that culture? So we're looking at it from a couple ways. One, as a company, how do we make sure we're doing the best we can to be that inclusive place? And then secondly, as a platform, and maybe even more importantly as a platform, because we do have 690 plus million members. The more we can sort of change that experience so many more people feel comfortable and feel like they can actually get that economic opportunity, that next job or that better job, that's where we can really make a sort of impact and help, at least to some degree, what's going on out there.
And I had mentioned before we got on our conversation that I would ask on behalf of someone I've spoken to. I told Fred, who is your right hand man, who helps feed you some ideas of how we were going to have this conversation. I was going to forward a question from someone named Belinda Smith, who works close with the industry on diversity and inclusion issues, and she had raised to me that she thought that when she talks about Black Lives Matter or racial justice issues, that her content was not getting as much engagement. And I said I would ask that on her behalf today. So I want to know, is there any way that algorithms could, just for any reason, disadvantage certain content type?
No, and obviously I don't know the individual or the individual issue and the reality of that. And certainly I'd be happy to have a follow-up question or discussion, or make sure I can put her in touch with even somebody on the flagship team that can explain sort of how the algorithms work, but as best they can, to share. But no, it's the content has exploded on the platform about, again, Black Lives Matter. As I mentioned earlier, the COVID, where we went from sort of 0 to roughly 30% very quickly around COVID content or COVID mentions on the platform. It was very similar. I don't have the exact numbers, but it was similar for Black Lives Matter, meaning it went from 0 to a much greater percentage as we came in through the early parts of the summer, and we started to see some of this social work or social injustice, which then the protest and Stop Hate for Profit and all these things that started to follow through. And even still to today, related to Kenosha, Wisconsin, the last couple of days, there's a lot more content that's being shared, a lot more content that's being discussed and in the ecosystem of LinkedIn. And so I don't know that personal experience, but I do know that it's a conversation that's happening. And it's important to be happening in the business context and a professional network. It should be happening there too, to make sure that we make changes.
Sure, there's a lot of issues involved in terms of Silicon Valley and equitable algorithms, and there's so many different ways that these can play out, that things can manifest in ways that it's just hard to understand how it all plays together.
Yeah. And part of it has been talked about for a while, which is sort of our own echo chambers, where we follow people that look like us or that went to the same school as us, or we worked with them at some other company. It's important to understand how networks work, which is sort of, again, around that idea of sort of you're building your own network. We're giving you tools to sort of connect with people. One of the things we're doing more recently is to amplify diverse voices on the platform, to make sure actually that you are not just connecting, or at least exposed to, people that you already know or already are connected with, but we've started to amplify Black voices. We're amplifying diverse voices to make sure that you're exposed to them. So then you may actually be able to sort of start to go down a path that you wouldn't have based on an algorithm or based on, your own networks. But we're trying to sort of, again, make sure that diversity is a really important part of your experience on the platform. Diversity of opinion, diversity of opportunity, diversity of, basically every aspect. So, that's one of the other things which I had forgotten to mention as part of the coming through sort of pandemic and coming through some of the challenges in the US related to these sort of racist behaviors and the movements, is to actually use the platform as productively as we can. And this notion of amplifying diverse voices is one of the first things we're seeing happen.
Absolutely. And talking about, like we said, the election is coming up, so it gets so heated on social media. You can't avoid that. What's the, do you run election ads? Are you seeing you seeing the election play out on LinkedIn?
No, we don't. We don't allow political ads. So and we haven't. So we looked at it when we go back to the 2016 election. This is probably, I got to LinkedIn in the sort of early fall of 2013. And we had thought about a political ads team as we were coming into the election. So this is probably 2015-ish. We were planning to sort of make an effort there. And what we saw in sort of just our own sort of field, sort of going out and meeting some of the candidates, and this at this point was just still the primaries on both the Democrat and Republican side. And we were interested, and the editors at LinkedIn were interested in hearing from the candidates and putting their platforms out there on LinkedIn. We thought it may be a place that would make sense. And actually, immediately thereafter, it was clear that our members weren't comfortable with having a political discussion or debate on LinkedIn. It was sort of felt like it was for a different platform. And it's maybe back to what I was saying before, that your conversations here are tied to who you are as a professional. And for most of us, we've probably been uncomfortable about sharing a lot of our political views in the office. Now, certainly things have started to change with what's gone on in the last couple of years, as divisive as things have gotten. But we'll still see what happens as we come into this election. But it's certainly not happening as much as other topics. It's not the politics or the election has not become a big sort of content generator for us. And we still don't take political ads and don't work with any political campaigns.
And I'm gonna ask you one last question. Just what are the areas we're gonna dive into next on LinkedIn? Are there other areas, like I think I brought a podcast before, or connected TV? LinkedIn has tried to get in that space, or
not yet. I mean, I think we have a huge sort of amount of opportunity across, whether it be the talent spectrum, whether it be the marketing selection or the marketing spectrum, sort of what we're working on, advertising, working with brands, helping brands hire talent, the learning solutions business. So how do we help companies set up their own sort of learning tracks for their employees? And then certainly a business around helping more salespeople be more productive. So all of those businesses are going full steam ahead. I think from a product standpoint, as I mentioned before, I think stories is very interesting. It's a lower bar for engagement. We're going to be excited to sort of get that going in the US. Events, as I mentioned, certainly of live events. And sort of understanding of how people want to interact with events going forward is interesting for us, exciting. Connected TV, podcasting, these are certainly areas that sort of make sense. It's more of prioritization. And when we get there, how do we get there? What do people want to do on LinkedIn related to podcasts? How do you want to interact with a connected TV app on your Roku or your Apple TV or Chromecast? What do you want to get out of LinkedIn in that experience? These are all things that are probably in our future, but no plans as of now.
Very well then. So, Penry, I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions and talk with me today, and always want to be able to talk with LinkedIn whenever that's possible. So
great.
Thank you for doing it.
Great. Thanks, Garrett. Good to see you.
Always good to see you.